Well, thank you for coming. I hope we would have a few more people, but that means you can ask all the questions you want to ask. Hopefully my mind will get up and going again. I have an acre and a half property. We've been there 47 years, started from house under construction. It's been my mission to grow every perennial on the market, and I'm doing a pretty good job at it. I have a non-gardening husband, so in the fall, hundreds of plants go into the garage on my side, but he won't give up any of his side, so my car has not been in the garage in over 15 years. I work at a garden center. Tomorrow will be my first day back there, but I just can never have enough plants. So some of these I will recommend and some maybe not, but my forsythia is starting to bloom. It's not full bloom yet, but it's starting to bloom. This is a spirea that is, and these daffodils are, awake. So I always try to have a progression of bloom. Not everything is, I don't think the bulbs being perennials, because once they bloom, they're gone. But I put a few of those in just to show. Also, the dogwood trees everything's early this year. I can't believe it's just been such a mild winter and a mild early spring that I'm finding things are blooming quite a bit earlier than I would have regularly expected. But these are our American dogwoods that are native. And this one is 47 years old. Still doing really well. Got the disease that dogwoods got for a while, but it recovered itself, so it didn't die. But I love the dogwoods, the white, the pink, the little berries that the birds and the chipmunks take care of during the fall. But this gives you multi-season interest, so it is kind of perennial, but it's a woody plant. Crab apples also. That one was planted. Well, that's 10 times the size it was when I first planted, and this is about 50% of what it looks like right now. It is almost as big as this room. But this crab apple is just, it has bloomed every single year for 47 years without fail. And there have been as many as 12 different species of birds in that tree all at the same time. So it's really easy to grow, seeds all over my yard. It's a wonderful, easy plant, technically, also native. Also, now it's daffodil time. Mixed emotions. They're beautiful when they're in bloom, but as much as, you have to leave the foliage up. And it looks so ugly after a while. And I know people who go to the trouble of braiding them. But then they're not photosynthesizing.
Yeah,
along the leaves, which means that you really should leave them, so I kind of grow them towards the middle to the back of my borders so that other plants kind of cover them up a little bit, but there are just so many varieties that they're easy to grow, and animals don't eat them. They're toxic to critters, so at least they don't eat them. That doesn't mean some of the neighbors that walk by I live in a huge circle, and a lot of people take their kids for walks and they let them go over and pet them and take them home with them, which I'm not always too happy about. But
do you have any recommendations of a plant that would start to grow with kind of the same time that daffodil does, so that it's ready to obscure the dead stuff? I have a ton of daffodils and a lot of space to fill in.
Well, I take some perennials and put those in around them, some of the ones that bloom especially early, so that because they still have to get photosynthesis by getting some light, but at least as I go along, I'll mention some that you could pop in there. I gave up on tulips years ago. It was absolutely, no matter what I did, no matter what was out there, deer came in and completely wiped them out every single spring. And I mean, right down, you'd never think he even had them. I put 3 in, about 5 of them in, because my husband, who was a non-gardener, I was pointing out some beautiful perennials. He said, I'd really just like to see some pretty red tulips. So I planted the red tulips. The deer not only ate it, they actually pulled up the whole bud. And about this long, and they pulled up all the bulbs and just destroyed the whole thing. So I go to Tower Hill Botanic Garden. I don't know whether any of you have ever gotten there, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And I go there once every spring just to see the tulips when they're there, right next to the door so the animals aren't eating them. But on to the perennials. This is one of my absolute favorite. This is one of the hellebores. They're shade lovers. This is Jacob, and I bought Jacob like many times. I bought this in May and didn't plant it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And finally, in October, I finally planted it, and it started to bloom. And it bloomed from October to April. And this is Jacob. He has done that every single year. He starts blooming in October. He blooms. And the year we had 15 feet of snow, the snow melted and it had 40 flowers on it. So this is, to me, I have probably 25 different kinds of hellebores, but Jacob is just exceptional. The way, it's white, has beautiful, rich, dark evergreen foliage, which is evergreen year-round, unless the deer or the bunnies decide to eat some of it. But they don't seem to like this one that much. But Jacob, to me, is just, and I have some seedlings now that just pop up in my gravel walks and other places, and just let it go. And in the middle of the winter, all of a sudden, a little white flower here, another little white flower there.
Could it handle a little afternoon sun?
If it had got sun, it would prefer morning sun and afternoon shade. I mean, some of mine do get some sun. They're not really happy. So I usually stick to partial shade. This is another one of there are just so many hellebores now. Some of them are, very evergreen and ivory colored, shiny foliage, and other ones are like these, I'm trying to remember what they're called. Lenten roses. There's orientalis and Lenten roses, and this one is in full bloom right now. Probably has 20 flowers on it. It's just absolutely stunning. But this is all different hellebores. This bright yellow one is in full bloom right now with kind of reddish pink centers on it. There's double ones. They have beautiful foliage, and they're just really easy to grow in the shade and give you some color. Some of the Lenten roses that are starting to bloom now, their foliage doesn't go through the winter very well, and then it starts looking really ugly, so I usually give it a major haircut and just enjoy the flowers, and then the foliage fills in. But the ones like Jacob, foliage is rich and very thick, so it never needs repair. So
Is Jacob the only one that blooms in the fall into the spring?
It's the only one that I have, at least. I have other ones that have more of the dark, shiny foliage, but they don't bloom in the fall. Only Jacob seems to be the one that, for whatever reason, and I've had it now probably 15 years, and every year it blooms.
What kind of soil do they think?
Moisture retentive, but well drained. But it definitely needs partial shade. It doesn't like to be in full sun. But it's, I have it in 5 different kinds of gardens, most of which don't get partial shade, but they seed and suddenly show up in other places, and but they're not in full afternoon sun. I think they really would cook. And they're pretty easy to find in certain, I don't know what your nursery situation is around here. Do you have a really great nursery that offers?
Noonan's has it's really got a gold pedal. Yeah, and you got to go down to Corliss Brothers.
Lake Street in Salem, was Lake Street Nursery? It's in New Hampshire, something.
Yeah.
I don't do penny.
Yeah.
I travel a lot of distances for certain plants, but most of them are still. I live on the South Shore. I go to a place called Russell's.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's in Wayland.
Yes.
I mean, for many years, we had the Newbury Perennial Gardens, which was really.
I remember that
it was
name.
there on-
Yeah.
It was on
And
Orchard.
Western Nurseries also.
Western nurseries carry stuff like that, but Russell's is one of my favorite. It takes me about 40 to 45 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
Oh, Pettingill, we have Pettingill too.
Oh.
Pettingill Farms there by Newbury on Ferry Road.
See, I don't get up this way very, because there's so many, and I work at a garden center too, so that does have a bit of a,
So they have a lot of perennials up there.
but I just, Russell's, I make that trip, you know.
That's a fantastic place.
And I'm a member of Massachusetts Horticultural Society, and if you're a member of that, you get a discount at Russell's on all the plants. So, which is kind of nice, so if you ever think of it. But there's, I'm trying to think, and I do go to, they just opened a Western Nurseries in Hingham, which is right near me, maybe 2 years ago, but it's nowhere near as the one in Weston that really has it. I haven't been there in a long time, it's just a hike, I mean, to get out there. This is a native plant, this is bloodroot. And I bought it years ago. It just shows up in other parts of my garden now. This is in full bloom right now. Both of them are in, and I especially like this one. It looks like little water lilies.
Mhm.
It's a double bloodroot. It does bloom for about 5 minutes. But when, you know, while it's in bloom, I mean, this looks exactly like this right today. It's been in bloom for about 3 or maybe 5 days. The nice thing about it, though, is when it goes by, this is its foliage. And you wouldn't believe how many, my garden's open to the public, how many people walk through the garden. This looks like this all summer long, and they say, "What's that?" So it has very attractive foliage on top, and it's native. And a lot of people are trying to go towards the native theme of planting in their gardens. Phlox. There are so many kinds of phlox, and all of them, every phlox is native to the USA. So you're dealing with strictly native plants. This was taken at a place called Garden in the Woods. I don't know whether any of you, if you've gone to Brussels, you might have gone to Garden in the Woods, which is the Native Plant Trust. It used to be the New England Wildflower Society, but now it's called Native Plant Trust. And that actually was taken there. This is a ground phlox that stays very low and, you know, blooms for a long time, and the foliage is pretty much evergreen. Pretty much keeps it.
Does it start well from seed?
I haven't really ever tried phlox from seed. Once I have one, they seed all over the place, so I don't usually have to do, actually I spend a lot of time reducing the amount because they do so well. But this is great because other things will grow up around them and through them, and they just bloom, and bees, butterflies, all love them. But this one only grows, I mean, it's a ground cover. That's a short one. We'll come back to the bigger guys. This goes by the delightful name of lungwort. But it's a wonderful perennial. It usually starts off with pink buds that then open to lavender buds. Some are very extremely variegated or all different colors. There are white ones. They're just and they are the first plant I see at the nursery I work at and at home attract the hummingbirds. So May 1st, every year around May 1st, the hummingbirds, I have a hummingbird feeder that has suction cups that I put on my bay window in my kitchen. And starting right about, I haven't set it up yet, and all of a sudden, the hummingbird will be going back and forth across the window. Where's my food? What's going on? Why haven't you started it? So they show up there every single, about the 1st of May, almost every single year. I gotta go find the feeder. I'm not sure where it is right now, but you know, the other thing I love about them, they keep their foliage into the month of October. They still look really good even in October. So lots of different shades of white, pink, blue, lavender, and some are very silvery and shiny, and some are very extremely variegated, but it's an easy plant to grow. Solomon seal. This is also, the tall one is native. These other ones are not native, but the tall one is native, stands about that tall. And it gradually, its superficial rooting and it gradually can fill. I have about an area about this big that's all solid seal that started with one original plant. But it's easy, it's very superficial. It's only about that deep, really easy to pull out if it goes where you don't want it, and then it makes little berries on some of them. Some are prettier than others. I have some now that have red, bright red stems that are really cool. Yeah, but this one is native, these other ones are not, but you can go crazy collecting those. Primulas, again, a big family of plants that are happiest in partial shade. I'm doing mostly partial shade plants right now. They're very easy to grow, superficial. Bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds love them, although not too many butterflies out and about now, but this is the kind of primrose, though, that I love the most. I'm drawing a blank on that. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on what it is, but it's called the
So the previous one was that the drumstick?
yes, that one is a drumstick.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, that makes sense.
And this is, I think this one is vulgaris.
Okay.
What I love about it is it's, and again, my brain has been very, very tired lately. It has this neat thing because it starts off about this tall. And then it makes it, and it looks like a little spoke, like a, almost like a bicycle. And as those flowers start to fade, a new one comes up. And it makes another one. And then it makes a new one. And it makes another one. So it starts out that tall and ends up about that tall. Comes in multiple colors and the hummingbirds go insane over it. They just can't. So it really is a cool looking plant and very easy to grow, but it does need moisture retentive soil. And they come in whites, they come in pinks, they come in these reds. It's just it adds a lot of color in with my hosta collection, which I'm out of control with. This is another one of my favorites. Some call it brunera, some call it runnera. I call it runnera. But this is easy to grow. It has beautiful forget-me-not flowers early in the spring. This is Jack Frost. It has the pretty blue flowers. Who cares? It looks like that the entire summer. Only grows about, that tall, but Jack Frost is just, people always stop and say, what is that? It's real, and it seeds about. I get, kids in other parts of my yard, but especially for a shady garden, it really brightens up a shady garden. There's another one called Alexander the Great. That hasn't been quite as happy as Jack Frost. I got that. I don't remember where I first got it, but I've had it probably for 15 years now. And people who walk through the garden go, wow, what's that? It just really, that's pretty, but the foliage on that is gorgeous. Any of you grow old-fashioned bleeding heart? It's been around a long time. I must admit, I don't like it because it goes dormant, at least in my yard. By midsummer, it just kind of disappears. I love the gold one that has the reddish flowers, but I have a lot of them. They do seed around a certain amount, but then they just disappear. And we have this one that's also in the same family, bleeding heart. Very different looking. This is low growing, can spread into almost a pattern, and it is also considered old-fashioned bleeding heart. Not old, sorry, that's not what it's called. Fringe one. This is native. This one is not native. A lot of our perennials have now changed their botanical names. And people say, wow. This is now called Lamprotacnos. So it is no longer your typical bleeding heart. It is where you had the fringed one before, which was
Decentra.
dicentra,
Yeah.
which is what this used to be. It
Yeah.
is now called Lampropacnos. And people say, why? DNA. They have absolutely no relationship whatsoever. So, this is now Lampropacnos in those colors, and the fringe bleeding heart is still dicentra. But this blooms all summer long, stays low, and, bees and butterflies love it, but it's a very low, most of these dicentra stay quite low. And Lampropacnos is a totally different animal, and usually goes dormant. I find it just goes to sleep in the middle of the summer and looks kind of ugly. But Astilbes, this is another shade lover. Most of what I'm showing now is focused on shade plants. But Astilbes, I've grown them for probably 45 years. They just give, especially with so many shade plants having, the big leaves like hostas, this adds that beautiful, delicate look to it. It's easy to grow, but water, water, water. Especially when we have a drought summer, they start to get a little crispy on the edge, and a lot of times, that's it. They don't ever come back. So if you're going to grow Astilbes of any kind, and they're short ones and tall ones, make sure it's a place that gets really moisture-retentive soil. Because they bloom for a long time. Even without the flowers, the foliage is absolutely gorgeous. And they come in pinks and whites and reds and all kinds of colors, but you
How
really...
deep are their, do they tend to like to have a little more soil over their roots or whatever? They tend to seem, it seems like the roots tend to try and come up a little bit more.
Yeah, that hasn't really happened to me, I guess, but I have a lot of compost.
Okay.
Not that I put there, it's just happened from things dying.
Yeah.
But I do keep it, and I do give it a little bit of morning sun, but afternoon shade on, because they really are very prone to, if they start to turn brown, sometimes they never come back. So keeping an eye on them and looking for any kind of damage to the foliage is probably the way. If you can give them moisture-retentive soil, I have some that are 30 years old, and have come back every year, and some are this tall, and some are only that tall. But it's just, especially with all the hostas and things that I grow, it gives you a nice textural difference in the foliage. That's shady stuff. Now we're going to take a quick check to spring, summer stuff. And again, another phlox, and again, native to the USA, all the phloxes. These are the ground cover ones that stay very low to the ground. They like it hot and dry. Sun, 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 and dry, dry, dry. If you give them, people who have irrigation and water it constantly can actually make it rot. So very important to let it have sunny, dry abuse. The least abuse it. Just don't do anything for it. People who have automatic irrigation sometimes drown to death because they just get too much moisture. So dry soil, evergreen foliage, so they keep their foliage all winter long. They can get winter sunburn in the winter. So we have a real Christmas tree every year, so I cut off all the branches on January 1st, and I take the branches and I just settle them over the top of because they can actually get winter burn. So throwing the branches from the Christmas tree, protects them just enough so that they don't get damaged, but they still get moisture, and it protects them from the hot sun in the middle of the winter. Fragrant, easy. First thing that we get of it in the nursery, and within 2 days they're gone. I usually try to go, sometimes the best place I can find them are at grocery stores, because they're really hard, they're very, very popular. But they can grow into mats this big around if you just let them grow. Dianthus is very similar, very, very fragrant. I love having them right next to the front walk where people go up in, lots of different colors. Really, Dianthus, very, very easy to grow. And It's just finding a good place, and similar thing, well-drained soil. It likes neglect. There are, not that many plants that like neglect, but these, and I always put them on the front wall.
Do they tend to do all right with acidic soil? Like if you had them near pine trees?
Oh, yeah, I don't even have any trouble with acid soils. Iris, this was my first plant addiction. I got up to about 150 varieties of iris. And these are dwarf ones. These only grow about under 12 inches tall. Bloom really early. They should be coming into bloom first week of May, usually. And all different colors. Some have these little blotches on them. They come in all different colors. Easy to grow. They want full sun and very well-drained soil. And they want their little rhizomes. I think I'll have another picture better, but those rhizomes have to be above the surface of the soil. You don't want to pour a bunch of mulch on them. You don't want to pour a lot of leaf. Well, I'll show another picture. Then you go into intermediate bearded irises, and then you go into the tall bearded irises. And so if you start in May, and some of these will actually go into the beginning of July. June is their favorite time period, but the possibilities are they're just hundreds of them. I used to buy them all from a place out in Oregon or something like that. And they were very reasonably priced, and that one I've had for 40 years. And it comes back every year, but do I have a picture? There's another one, bitones. You really can go crazy with these. I don't have it in this picture, but those rhizomes, you have to leave the top of the rhizome exposed to the sun. They want really well-drained soil, full sun, but that you don't want to cover the rhizome with mulch or anything because it will rot. So you really want it close to the surface. Every August, I dig some of the older ones up and chop them up and cut the foliage way back and replant them because they do eventually just start growing over and over, and then they're no longer reaching the soil, so they're not surviving. So I just...
Well, then all those little baby ones often look like it's taking energy away from the main one, so you do have to clean it up.
But I always do the dividing in August. That is my favorite time to do all the bearded iris movement. And then there's Siberian iris. And they're a totally different animal. They'll take a little bit of shade for one thing, where the bearded iris really want sun, sun, and sun. Siberian iris, they'll take wet soils. They'll take dry soils. They come in lots of different colors. They have clumps rather than just a few big flowers. Come in lots of different colors. Can I have a picture of them? Lots of different colors, too. I find them very easy to grow. I don't know whether I have another picture of them. There's a nursery down in Rehoboth, which I know is a hike from here, but I'll be showing you one of the images, too. But they have acres and acres of Siberian iris, Japanese iris, and several thousand varieties of dates. And you just walk through these beautiful meadows with their signs on every one, and you just say, oh, that one. These you would have to order primarily online at Tranquil Lake Nursery, and I think it's on the handout what the name of the place is. I worked there for 15 years. And it was a hike for me, so Rehoboth would be even more of a hike for you guys. But if you happen to be going down that way or towards Rhode Island, it's a nice place to stop. And the colors, and they're easy to grow. I mean, and they bloom much longer than the bearded irises do. And animals, they don't seem to have too much trouble with animals. Peonies, they live forever. They're still the ones that Thomas Jefferson had at his home. It still exists, over 125 years old. They live forever. And they're easy to grow as long as you plant them correctly, and they come in lots of different colors. They bloom in June. They're just remarkably easy to grow, but you do have to be aware of them in lots of different colors. These are the old-fashioned ones. I mean, Festiva Maxima has been around. My mother gave it to me 47 years ago, and it still blooms every single year. But they're single ones and all different colors and flowers. The only time to divide them is in the fall. So October is ideal for dividing the peonies otherwise. And how deep you plant them is absolutely critical. I don't have pictures of the rhizomes here, but those rhizomes should be no deeper than 2 inches below the soil. If you plant them too deeply, they usually won't bloom. So they really like superficial planting, and they end up with, they actually look like tree shrubs, tree legs on them. They get so they can get that big around. So, but the little eyes they get, that where the flowers and the foliage is going to come from, should be planted no deeper than 2 inches deep. If you plant it deeper, they'll send up foliage, but they'll never flower. So planting depth is really critical. And this is the latest in the peonies. These are called Ito or Ito peonies. And they're a cross between tree peonies and the other ones that I should remember the name of, but it blooms much later. It gets flowers that are absolutely huge in totally different colors, shocking raspberry colors. This is a yellow one that I've had for quite a while now. And it's, I don't know whether I wrote it down or not.
Is it what is it? Partzella?
Claricella. And this doesn't know, it has shocking orange in the middle too. But they're just incredible, but they are extremely expensive. When they first came out, they were like $100. They have come down every year. They had really nice ones at Russell's, but they were fairly expensive. But I've had Partzella for a number of years now, and they come back every year. They have beautiful foliage. They bloom a little later than the other ones, and they're just stunning. They're just expensive for now. Anyone grow this?
Yes, I do, yeah. I do.
Baptisia.
Yeah.
It's actually native. It looks like asparagus when it's coming out of the ground in the spring. I have never had any creature ever touch it. Nothing eats it. False indigo is another name of it. It's a member of the pea family. They now come in yellows and blues and multicolors and white and all different colors. The only thing is, once they're established, you will need a backhoe. They get a root system that you just can't, I mean, they're just, roots go down about that deep, but they're and they bloom for weeks. So it's a really nice, attracts bees and butterflies, but no animals ever touch them. So
They do tend to like put the greens around almost like a peony, but stake it sometimes because they get a little.
oh, really? Mine have never gotten it.
Floppy.
They actually like crummy soil.
Yeah.
So if you give them really good soil, that may encourage them to be a little more flopsy-mopsy.
Well, no, it's not really good soil.
But there are now shorter ones and big ones, but it's a really easy plant, but give it space because I have a few that are this wide now, and I tried to dig one up. It was a waste of time. I just moved everything else away from it. There's a yellow version.
Yeah.
I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous and they bloom a long time, but again, it's really beneficial and nothing eats it. No deer, no rabbits, nobody ever tries to eat it, which I think is a plus. There are perennial geraniums. Of course, the geraniums that people buy that are called geraniums aren't geraniums. But these are native. That one's a native, that one's a native. This is Roseanne, that's a cultivar that blooms on and off from June to frost. Never stops. It's a beautiful low ground cover, and it just blooms and blooms and blooms. And This one also is great on traffic islands. A lot of our town uses this as a traffic island because it blooms all summer long. Never quits. It sprawls around, but it never buries anything or chokes anything else. It just kind of works its round, anything around. And it just blooms and blooms. Very, very easy to grow. I didn't even recognize it. The color is kind of weird from this direction, but there's so many kinds of salvias. And what I like about them is so many of my plants are moundy. This one gives you a really nice, upright, spokey type of plant, and it blooms for a really long time. And they come in purples and pinks and whites. They're just mostly spring bloomers. They probably don't bloom much until probably mid-May, and then they're pretty much gone for the rest of the season. But there's a lot of salvias. Some of them do bloom quite a bit later. So easy to grow, like a sunny and poor soil. Doesn't really need really nice soil. This is a native plant. Some call it has a lot of common names. Sundrops is one of its more common names, but it is native. It makes a beautiful little low-grown mound of color with these beautiful red stems and flowers. And again, critters just absolutely love it. So I'm really into the bees and the butterflies and the good guys. Catmint, you said you were herb person.
Yes.
And catmint certainly qualifies for that. The number of bees and other insects that are attracted to it, I mean, they're just always there. This blooms pretty much on and off most of the summer. Sometimes I get around and I just take a head shears and I crack it all off, and then it all comes back again. But really great for wildlife, and it does smell really nice too. So we're leaving the sun for a little while, and we're going to one of my shade gardens. Ferns, our native ferns. This is cinnamon fern, and I've had it for probably 40 years. It comes back every year. It doesn't spread very much. It just has these lovely cinnamon stems, but so many of the plants, especially hostas, I need something textural to go with it. This is a neat dwarf maidenhair fern, and it only grows 3 inches tall, and it just makes this, it just makes this absolutely gorgeous. It's evergreen, looks like that all winter long. The new growth on it is a little peachy color right now, and I have a space that's probably from here all the way around there. I got it at a neat hosta nursery up in New Hampshire, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's awesome. And I've had it for years, and clubs that have come to visit take little pieces home and then to plant. Japanese painted ferns are gorgeous. They have all this silver and gray, a lot of times some red thrown in there too. Only grows maybe a foot or two, probably under 2 feet tall. And again, shade can be kind of boring, but this really adds a lot of pizzazz with it. There are just so many native ferns you can grow. This one is Dre's Dagger. And everyone who walks up my back walk and sees Dre's Dagger, it's called a crested fern. The ends of the ferns all split and almost look like little brushes on the end of each of them. And it gets a really nice texture to throw in with, again, I've grown quite a few pastas and other things in those areas. There are also great ornamental grasses for the shade. Most of our fancy grasses tend to be sunflowers, but these are shade-loving ones. And most of them are sedges. Some are native, some are not native. This one is bunny blue, and that one is native, and it's more blue than that picture shows. But they're all evergreen. They keep in foliage year-round. The only bad thing is the bunnies think they're very good. I think the deer are part of it too, but there's gold ones and blue ones and variegated ones, and they don't grow about that big. So they're just this little mound that's evergreen that I put up near the front of my borders with the astilbes and the hostas and things like that behind it. But pretty readily available. They're called keratosis. And then we have what is commonly known as Aconicola macroaureola.
I say that.
Japanese forest grass. It is, when you first buy it in a little pot, it looks like nothing, but every year it gets a little bigger, and when it's in the middle of the summer, the wind blows and it looks like the ocean. It just breathes. People come in, they all go over and say, what is that? It just has this wonderful, texture. There's gold ones, and this is what it looks like in the middle of the winter. But very, very easy to grow, and it likes hard shade. So it's handsome, it's easy, but it starts a little bit on the short, it's small to begin with, and it takes a year or so for it to get to this size, but it just gives you a wonderful texture to mix it in.
How much do it probably varies from plant to plant, but how much do they spread horizontally? Do you need like a big space for the grasses?
It takes them a while to get going,
Okay.
but once they do, even the ones I've had a really long time really aren't, that I probably had 15 years, are only about that long.
Okay.
So, and nobody seems to eat it. I haven't had any trouble with critters eating them, which is always nice. As I said, they're delicate, and people will come in and they say, oh, I feel like I'm, at the beach, because it just slightest breeze and it just sways back and forth. Lamium, depending on how you want to spread it, this is a real ground cover. So it likes the shade, comes in lots of different colors. It's easy to pull up if it goes where you don't want it, but boy does it spread. And it then shows up in odd places. It took a real beating this past summer for me. Have any of you had to deal with jumping worms? Haven't even heard of jumping worms?
I've heard of it, but I haven't had to deal with them.
They just decimate my lamium. I mean, they just eat all the roots. And they're really bad business. I found them in the fall and in the winter, I'd be just swiping some leaves and there were jumping worms. They're a real problem all over the country now.
What did you do about them?
I collect them. They're very superficial. So I come across them and I take a little hand spade and pick them up and throw them in buckets. And then I feed them to my trained frogs. I have a little water garden that's in a container that's about 5 by 7, and every year frogs show up. I have flat rocks all the way around it, and as soon as they see me coming, they jump out and sit on top of the rocks, put their heads up and look at me, and wait for me to throw them worms. And I didn't realize that for quite a few years what I'd been giving them in the way of worms that I always found so many of were the jumping worms. And they seem to do okay with those, and it's a nicer way to get rid of them. I do get 2 years ago, I think I got 5,000 jumping worms. My lawn, my whole lawn, I just start walking across and all of a sudden jumping worms. So they started out about that big, but they ended up about that big. And they're a real problem throughout the New England area. So if you don't have them, be grateful, because I just can't, but I love them. My frogs are just amazing. You can't believe how many garden clubs come just to see the frogs. And 5 little green frogs, only about that big. I haven't seen them yet this spring. I'm hoping they're either still hibernating or I have a brook on my property. But they show up every year, but I had no idea I was feeding jumping worms for these years. But that was one of their favorite, the jumping worms, that was one of their favorite areas. And shade can be a little on the boring side because not as many bright colored flowers grow, but I think that's pretty nice just with foliage. So hostas, that's a stilbe. There's this is a short growing iris that grows really early. Japanese forest grass, there's just so many neat things. Oh, Eucharist, we'll be coming back to those, but it doesn't, shade gardens don't have to be worn. You can throw in some, other, we'll see some other, this is, again, I planted that many, many years ago. It looks like that from May to October with absolutely zero maintenance. That's the Japanese painted firm, that's the Japanese, what I was talking about a little while ago. Japanese something or other. But, the firm, there's just so many things. The only thing that's colored there, I threw copious in there. It gave me a little color, but it looks like it's from May to October with no maintenance.
What do you have planted right in front of the variegated moss?
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
I've had it for years and years and years.
I've seen it, but I don't really know the tiny leaves.
I'll have to go, I can't remember. I actually think it's a native too, but I've had it for, I must honestly say, for the last 6 months, I'm really struggling with memory loss. I think it might be related to Solomon seal. I think it's a dwarf, I think that's what it is. I think it's a dwarf Solomon seal that only grows that tall.
Right. Is it a flower?
It has little white flowers in the spring. I don't know whether you can really see them, but it has little clusters of white flowers. You can't really see it in the picture, but it has, little things of that long, a really tiny little, and I think it's Solomon seal. And it only grows that tall, whereas my other Solomon seals grow that tall. So it's an incredibly dense ground cover.
Right.
But I'd have to go home and try to look it up somewhere in one of my handouts. Maybe in one of my shade garden presentations, because that is all shade, and I do a lecture on just shade gardens. Heucheras, coral bells, they've gone a little crazy with all the coral bells. I took out some of the pictures of them. This is the old-fashioned one that my mother passed along to me. #1 favorite with the hummingbirds. Those teeny tiny little flowers, they just absolutely cannot resist them. The foliage is evergreen, but now they come in all these different colored foliages, and they all keep their foliage through the winter. The only thing is that the bunnies think they're really nice. I think it's mostly the bunnies that have eaten them through the years, but
What's the name?
it's just called coral bells.
Oh, okay.
So they're all coral bells, but Heuchera is the botanical name for the coral bells. And these tend to be more called the Heucheras, whereas this one is always called coral bells. But again, I've had this for 47 years, and it still comes back every year, and the hummingbirds and the bees and occasionally the butterflies. Oh, there are some other color ones. So these are all coral bells or Heucheras also. And some of them have soft, fuzzy leaves, and some of them have shiny leaves. The only negative I find is that the bunnies really do like them. I don't think the deer bother them much. I think it's mostly the bunnies. I have at least 5 families of bunnies in my yard. I mean, they're so cute. And I get so upset with them because they're so annoying. And I used to think hostas were the most boring. I just could not get excited about hosta. I thought they were just absolutely the most boring plants. They've come a long way. So you probably can't see, but this gold one has shocking red, what's called perennials, the stems. I mean, shocking red. This one is one of my favorites and one of the first ones I ever bought. Its name is Tokudama Oreo Nebulosa. Well, you remember that? It's actually on the handout though, but they come variegated. This one, when you see it, it almost looks like a vase. It just has this wonderful form to it. Deer are an issue, but otherwise they're just so easy to grow. We have an incredible hosta nursery near where I live, but you can go insane over them. And they come in different forms now. That one's called curly fries. And it only grows about 6 or 7 inches tall, but it has ruffles all along the leaves. This one's called a big good drinking gourd. When it rains, it actually holds the water in those cups, and they have really rough foliage to them. They're just so, they're about 9,000 named varieties of hostas now. I grow about, I grow about 200 varieties. This is one of my favorites. That's called Liberty, which I think is very, very pretty. Again, the deer and the bunnies really like it. This is one of my favorite ones too. This one is, I would say, I remember it.
So after Liberty and Neptune and June Spirit. Blue Ivory.
Neptune. So that one is Neptune. Now blue hostas, if you're going to grow the blue ones, which can be that even bluer than that, they have to be in full shade. As soon as that blue color is due to a wax layer sitting on the top of the foliage, and if it gets sun, it melts and it turns green. So if you're going to grow these blue ones, you want them in a lot of shade, or definitely want, you know, if you have any sun, it would be a little bit in the morning, but afternoon shade. And they are really blue by the fall. A lot of times they do start to turn green, but some of them are even more blue than this. I just happen to love the color and not have a lot of dead shade these days. As some of the other varieties that are out there, I mean, you can go crazy over all the different kinds of hostas. Some of them grow 4 inches tall, some of them grow this tall. Some of them have very fragrant flowers. So it really depends on the variety. This is the new trend. These are the stems, or the petioles, that now come in shocking red or incredible lavender or blue. The problem is, if you're growing a hosta and it's there, and it has those red stems, you have to get down on your hands and knees. And, you know, so at a national hosta convention I went to, a lot of these with these crazy petioles were growing in hanging baskets. Or in high containers. And they will survive almost anything through the winter. They're that hardy, so they're just some really, really neat ones. So they've come a long way, and there's teeny tiny mini, oops, I think I have some teeny tiny minis. These are minis. They only grow that tall. And again, they look really cute in containers, in front of the borders. You know, there's Cameo, there's a whole bunch of them that have names with Blue Bunny, and there's just a whole bunch of ones that have really, really, you know, only grow 3 or 4 inches tall. So they're great in front of the borders, but easy to grow. Again, animals still like them, so that's an issue. And this is just a little combination in one of my gardens. There's the one I just showed you, but you can really, you know, that's one of my favorite hydrangeas. That's Annabelle. Annabelle blooms every year. It's native to the USA. If you drive, we went to the National Daily Convention down south a couple of times, and we drove all the way down the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is just gorgeous. All the way down, Annabelle grows all the way down the Blue Ridge Parkway. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I just went out yesterday, and I cut all my Annabelle. That's a huge clump. It's big now. I cut all of them down yesterday to 6 inches tall. They were about this tall. I just cut them all down to 6 inches, and by June, it will look like that again. No maintenance, no, you know, the fancy hydrangeas to me are just, you know, the blue ones and all of those, they're just unreliable. Sometimes they bloom, sometimes they don't. Annabelle, do I have a picture? Oh, no. Annabelle also has a pink version now called Invincible Spirit. It was named for a lady who helped hybridize it and passed away of breast cancer. And when it first came on the market, every time someone bought it, a donation was made to breast cancer research.
So it's a shade plant?
Pardon me?
Hydrangeas or shade plants?
That one is in almost all of your hydrangeas prefer, well, I shouldn't say that, they're panicle hydrangeas which are white and have big bushy flowers and then turn pink. And those are sunlovers. Most of the rest of them would like partial shade. But it's just, Annabelle's just so easy. And I think my mother gave it to me probably 45 years ago. And every year it comes back, and I just went out yesterday and I just cut every single one down to about, 6 inches tall. And another 2 or 3 weeks, you'll never know what's coming.
Are those the same as something called snowbells? Snowballs? I remember my grandma telling me about snowballs.
I think that is one of the, common names for the Annabelles, and they're native to the USA and survive, whereas all the other ones are the blues and, pinks, but they are finicky.
I'm sorry, I have something else I have to
At
go.
least you have the handout.
Yes, I do.
My problem is I can talk to.
Oh, no, thank you so much, and I'll go on the website.
If you're ever headed towards the Cape,
Okay.
we only live about a mile off the Cape, off the Route 3.
Can I ask like a question on your website if I?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, all the information is on
Yes,
here for,
okay.
I go to the AOL and do it through that.
Okay.
The website is.
Okay. I'm reading it, you don't
Yeah.
mind getting questions.
Oh, all the time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Here's another awesome plant that blooms in August. And these are they're the same family, but they're two completely different looking animals there. Ligularia, this one's called the rocket. I don't know whether you can see the beautiful tiger swallowtail butterfly on there.
Yeah.
But it grows about this tall. It likes a moisture retentive soil. It's absolutely handsome. And gradually every year it's grown taller. And then you have Ligularia Brit Marie Crawford. Doesn't look anything like the other one. I've had it for probably 30 years, and every garden club that comes to tour my garden, no matter what season, well, I should say growing season, they stop me and say, what is that? It has this beautiful, it's red underneath, and the new growth is red, and then it turns to this luscious color, bronze. It's seen around my garden a couple of places, and in August, it makes these shiny, giant gold daisies. So it blooms at times when most other things have finished, easy to bloom, likes moisture retentive soil. So it likes the shade, but it does need some moisture. And that's why it actually does better in the shade. But very easy to grow and fairly available places. This is another one, the botanical name has now been changed. It used to be called bugbane, and it was Cimicifuga.
Cimicifuga.
It took me years to learn Cimicifuga. It is no longer called Cimicifuga. Like some of the other ones, were you here when we did I did the change of bleeding hearts. They have now changed botanical names. The old-fashioned, because of DNA, they now realize that old-fashioned bleeding heart and the ground-covered bleeding heart have no genetic relationship whatsoever.
Wow.
So it's no longer, the bleeding heart is now called Lanthropus, no longer Dicentra. Although the ground cover one still is called Dicentra. So
The
this
red one?
the one that stays really low, it has the bluish tint to it, stays small, like the old-fashioned bleeding
Or
heart.
like the fringe, because sometimes you call it fringe bleeding heart, the little one.
Little short, do red flowers?
Yes,
There's
so
no-
that's still Dicentra.
Oh, it
But
is?
the old-fashioned bleeding heart that really looks like, that's quite tall and it has a pretty little, that one's now called Lanthropus.
Okay.
So this used to be bugbane or, sorry.
Cimicifuga.
Oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. So this one used to be, this is native, among other things. And it grows native near my house in a wetlands area. And it has, almost like brushes on it. Sorry, brain is dead right now. So brunette, the ones that have the purpley, chocolate colored leaves are brunette. but it used to be bug bane, and now it's called Actea. So there is another plant that I grow called Actea that blooms in the spring, and these are now all considered Actea. Simsifuga is no more. So it's nice to learn botanical names, but it's not nice when they change it, especially when you have memory loss. This ranks, if I had to pick only 10 plants I could grow, this would always be one of my favorites. Turtlehead. Native, comes in pink and white. It is so, when it's not flowering, clubs visiting the club go and say, what is that? Because it has this beautiful, shiny, dark green foliage that is just absolutely handsome. But then mid to late August, the pink flowers start coming out. And the bees and the hummingbirds and everybody is there trying to open up the flowers and get in there to get at the nectar. It's really a handsome plant.
Beautiful.
And it spreads, I have it spreading around various parts on its own. I haven't spread it, it just moved there. It does get fairly tall, and the foliage is shiny and really dark green. It's essentially no maintenance. They now have a dwarf version that only grows about that tall. So they're really easy to grow. It has a botanical name that makes it a tiny version. I can't remember what it's called, but it looks just like that, just shorter. So there it is with little flowers, and there's also a white version, and they are native, but it's just watching the bees and other critters try to get into the nectar is really kind of fun to watch. This is one a lot of people get upset when I talk about it. This one lady did. Was giving a lecture in Littleton, and I showed this, and I mentioned that, it is toxic. And this lady stood up and she started screaming at me. That's poisonous. How can you possibly recommend, there's a, and so then I said, oh, do you grow oxgloves? Oh, of course. Oxglove is digitalis.
Yeah.
That yes, digitalis. Of course, maybe younger people don't know what digitalis is anymore.
Yeah.
But and I had pictures of that, but I tried to take some pictures out. But this is monkswood, and I have never had luck with delphiniums. They're pretty to look at. They cost a lot of money. I never get them to come back. This is like digitalis on steroids. It comes back every year. I have an area now that is probably about this big, starting from one plant. It looks like a delphinium, but it has, and it comes mostly in blue or lavender, but it grows about this tall. It has a pretty good taproot on it. It is toxic. If you choose to eat it,
stuff is.
if you choose to eat it, you run a risk of getting quite sick. My friend Carrie Ann Mendez, who's a fabulous speaker, said, animals are much smarter than people. They know not to eat it. And yes, if you ate a lot of it, you could get sick to your stomach. You probably wouldn't die, but it is and it blooms for weeks and weeks starting in October.
And what's its preferred soil?
It wants reasonably good soil. Mine happens to be in short shade. I've seen it growing. I think it's happier in maybe, morning sun, afternoon shade, but it's just handsome. And I have in 2 or 3 areas of my gardens, but it just happened that one area has now grown, about 6 or 7 feet wide. And you see that blooming late in the summer, but yes, it is toxic, but animals know better. And, people, you don't want to eat it. It probably won't. I think my friend Carrie Ann Mendez said, unless your children are ground feeders, you shouldn't have to worry about them. So it's a really
It's more
plant.
like it was, I heard one time when cats got a hold of it or something, it's toxic to the
Yeah.
cat. cats too, so it's like, I don't have cats, so I don't have to worry about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, you know, I have so many animals in my yard and I've never seen any animal eat them. I think it's for, I don't know why they, you know, haven't seen the problem. So we're going back to sunshine, you know, all kinds of plant combinations, you know, butterfly weeds and echinacea I go crazy over. There's so many possibilities for the sun. Coreopsis, many, many different varieties of coreopsis. They're all native to the USA. So there's, and they bloom on and off, a lot of them all summer long. So there's the thread leaf type, and then there's the ones that are more daisy-like. They now come in reds and lots of, you know, mixed colors. Many of them hybridized by a fellow that was from Massachusetts. I think he's still around, but I'm not sure. Shasta daisies.
I've never had any luck with Shasta daisies.
Really, and I've had them for 40 years.
I don't know what it is with me.
Yeah, they like sun, obviously, well-drained soil. They do have rhizomes, and the rhizome has to show a little bit above the level of the soil, and I try to dig them up every 2 years or so, because otherwise they just start growing over on top, and then the roots aren't meaning green ground anymore, because they've got other plant parts of them above.
I have a question for Jessica. I have a lot of clay soil in our basement and other plants on the front. How much of that do I have to dig out to get more soil for a Shasta daisy?
They're going to want some drainage. They don't, so I would just take some, we don't use peat moss anymore, but some sort of, you know, potting soil or something like that, and just mix it in, just to give it a little bit better drainage.
So I don't have to dig down in 2 feet.
No. So they're fairly superficially rooted, so you just want to make sure that and they do need sun. I mean, they'll tolerate some shade, but they're much happier in sun.
Actually, using just,
Yeah.
Lamb's ear, I don't love it, but how can you not? I can't stop every day to pick one leaf up and just walk around and, you know, rub it, because it's, you know, it just is soft and fuzzy, and it's, you know, got the nice silver, you know, foliage to it. It does need division once in a while, otherwise it just gets kind of rotty looking. Liatris, however you pronounce it. This is one my mother gave me, you know, 47 years ago. It always attracts bees, butterflies, and hummingbird moths. And I cannot tell you how many, one person came into my garden and she said, I have 20 hummingbirds in my yard. And I said, she said, oh, you should see them. And, you know, I said, hummingbirds are so territorial. You have one family per quarter acre. And they will fight each other to the death to prevent anyone else interfering in their locations. So this is a day flying moth. It's quite a bit smaller than a true hummingbird, common name is hummingbird moth. But they show up all over my yard, midsummer on, and they're just really cool to watch. I think I might have another picture of the bumblebee moth that looks just like it, but they're only about 2.5 to 3 inches tall, whereas the hummingbirds are 3 to 4 inches tall. And obviously that's a black swallowtail. Liatus just really attracts a lot of pollinators. Daylilies, there are over 90,000 registered varieties of daylilies now. And I have gone slightly crazy over them. That's, I don't know whether you can even realize that's a deep part, a purple one. But the diversity in them these days is absolutely insane. You can go really nuts. And I have been known to spend as much as $200 on one daylily back in the days. Those days are gone. I'm more into, I've gotten so much shade, I'm now a hostile collector, but I did have 500 varieties of daylilies at one time. And this is one of the new trend in daylilies. They almost look like watercolors. And I haven't bought one yet because they're still quite expensive, but I have to have some. Yeah, I just think those are absolutely stunning. Most of them would like moisture-retentive soils. They'll tolerate dryness, but if they had their others, they would really like moisture-retentive soil. And, you know, they come with, you know, fringed edges, they're tetraploids, they're daylily diploids. but they're just really easy to grow, but they really do like moisture. So really dry soil does not make them super happy. There are also spiders, that's what these are called. They have the skinny little petals. They're kind of fun to look at. And then we have the ones that so many people grow, the Stella Dior and Happy Returns. I don't grow either of them. I'm a snob. Yeah, they do rebloom if you give them, if you cut off the seed pods. If they put energy into the seed pods, then they don't make new flowers. But if you cut off the deadhead, which takes a lot of time in these, and if you keep them moisture retentive, especially in August, because it gets hot and dry, they will rebloom. And there are a lot of this family in the smaller flowers that will rebloom. This is taken at Berkshire Botanical Garden, and I mean, just mass gatherings of dailies can be quite colorful. This is the nursery I was talking about that had the Siberian iris. This is Tranquil Lake Nursery in Rehoboth, and it's acres and acres and acres, and you just walk around in full bloom in July, and you say, oh, I like that one, I like that one, and you pop it out. You walk, you go up and see how much they cost. I worked there for 15 years, which is how I learned.
Where is this place?
It's in Rehoboth, Massachusetts.
Oh.
Dayton, I think, is sort of in the same ballpark. It was over an hour drive for me a couple times a week, and it's Siberian iris in the spring, it's Japanese iris later, in later spring, and then plus he carries all kinds of very unique perennials. As far as I'm concerned, he's the best landscape designer in New England.
And what is the name of it?
Tranquil Lake Nursery.
Thank you so
And I think the website is Tranquil Lake Nursery. And it used to be open all the time. Wayne's getting older, and I think Wayne isn't right either. I've worked there for 15 years and I'm drawing a blank, but he's a very good friend of mine, and it's just very unique trees and shrubs available and perennials available, but the meadows in July is the peak time to go if you want to see the dailies. And Warren Leach. I say to myself, I'm going to get back there. I work in a nursery, I open my garden, it's kind of hard, but it's an absolutely beautiful place to go. Echinacea, probably one of my top 5 favorite perennials. They bloom a long time, they're natives. I leave the deadheads on for the entire winter, and goldfishes come in all winter long, pluck all the seeds out, and I started off with this much, and then now I have almost all the way down a fence from the goldfishes dropping the seed heads down. And they cross-pollinated with each other, and so I have all different colors now too. But they bloom pretty much all summer. Bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, all different colors of them. Easy to grow. Some of these are more compact and not as reliable as the straight species. But I mean, the butterflies are just unbelievable on them. They just show up all the time. And then we have the goldfishes in the fall, so you can't get enough echinaceas. And they're native. Most people are too kind to them. They are a wildflower. They don't want perfect lawn and perfect soil. They want average, everyday soil.
That's why they like my yard.
They love my yard. I don't have time for any of that stuff anymore. And this doesn't even do them. I just can't tell you how many butterflies I see, not to mention the bees and everybody else on them. This is called balloon flower, ladycoat. This is one that my mother passed along to me, again, over 40 years ago. And all of a sudden I started getting seedlings, and they looked like this. And I don't think they're a named variety, they're just ones that have shown up in various parts of my yard here and there, and I just get a big kick out of them. But, you know, they are taprooted. They bloom later in the summer, and they're just kind of unique. So I have platycoat in various parts of my yard. I only got hooked on these about 5 years ago, and they're top of the line. This is called agastaki, or it has other names. What's the one that's often? That's what I'm thinking of. Anise-hyssop. It has a wonderful fragrance to it, but it's spiky. So many of our other plants are, rounded, or, this one gives you a complete, and it blooms all summer. Once it starts blooming, it just keeps on going. There are blue ones and there are purple ones, attract butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. And it just blooms and blooms and blooms. So it's a really great plant. I'm trying to figure out where else I can stick it in my yard, because I'm starting back to work tomorrow, and I'm hoping we still have some leftover from last year. But it just smells good, and it's great for wildlife. And speaking of wildlife and fragrance, this is bee balm. Native. Oh, Agastaki's native. This is also native. You can see my little friendly hummingbird. Some of them just showed up in my yard. I think it was a plant sale, and someone must have left a piece in a pot, and it just showed up. And this one went from here to there, and everything else can work with it. So I just let it go wherever it wants. It's very superficially rooted. Bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, and Indians. It's native, and Indians used to use it as regular tea. They made Oswego tea. And the hummingbirds are just absolutely incredible on it. This one I didn't plant. This one I must have gotten one at a plant sale that wasn't a bee balm, it was something else, and there must have been a piece of the bee balm in it, and again, it was double the length of this, and I just let it go. It's very superficial. It's where I don't want it. It's almost like pulling a piece of tape. You can grab one end of it, and it's very superficial, and you just carefully and pull across, and you can pull it out, and then you can dump it somewhere else.
Can it tolerate medium soil?
It likes, I would say mediocre soil is good. It's native. It just grows.
Which one is this?
That's bee balm or Monarda.
Yeah, it's bee balm blue.
So you're looking at what, number 80 to 82?
Jacob Klein, is it?
No, the Jacob Klein, I think, is red.
That's raspberry.
That's one is raspberry.
This is raspberry wine.
Raspberry one, that's fine. Well, actually, I'm not sure on this one, because I didn't buy and plant this one. It just showed up. I have raspberry wine in another part of my garden, and it's similar, but maybe not exactly. But it just showed up, and I'm not kidding, it goes all the way down the length. I just grab a little bit, and I pull it like this, and move it to another place. And it smells so good. I mean, it does have it's a member of the mint family, and it's great. So that's definitely the raspberry wine that I did plant. And there's another one of the hummingbird moths, but that's the one that looks more like a bee rather than a hummingbird. But the male especially. This one is native around here, that light lavender version. So that's very common around here as a native plant also. And you have all kinds of rudbeckias. I must admit, I'm not a fan. I like this one. This one's a tall one. This one grows this tall. And, it's more of a lemon yellow. And it has, a pale green flower stem to it. But the old-fashioned black-eyed Susans, I consider it a thug. It just goes and goes and goes, and I'm out there all the time just taking a spade and digging them all up. And I had a friend who was a landscaper, and she saw me digging it up and saw me throwing it on the compost pile, and she asked if she could have it. So
That's why I don't mind digging up and giving it.
I put it down by my mailbox. I have a very long driveway. I put it down next to the mailbox, and anyone who wants to take it. And mostly they just show up when I haven't planted them. But this one is green, and it stands about this tall. And I have it right next to my front door and in another place, and I like that one much better than I like the old-fashioned type. This is your tall phlox, and again, native to USA all over the place and all different colors. Does not like getting irrigation at night. That will cause mildew. But I let it plant its seed all over my yard. Bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, they're pretty purple ones, pink ones. They're very easy, and when I get bored with them, I dig them up and throw them on the compost pile. There's a very pretty variegated version as well. And this
Is
is
that Fox, the white one?
yeah, that's a very, it might be on the list. Is that on there?
So you've listed bright-eyed
Norley,
Daylor.
that's Norley.
Norley.
So it has variegated foliage as well as white flowers. And I put that in probably 35 years ago, at least. But overhead watering at night, they're very prone to mildew. They do seed around, so these are, I have all colors, that aren't as attractive. They do like a moisture retentive soil, but otherwise, overhead watering is the worst thing. And it just, I don't find time for irrigation half the time. Joe Pyeweed, love it. That is native on my property. I have a wetlands meadow and a brook that used to have trout in it, brook trout in it. Unfortunately, we moved there and it was a brand new subdivision. And there were just 3 houses, and then they started putting in all these other houses. And the brook goes all, it's called Brookwood Road. The whole neighborhood has properties that drain into the brook. And they all have the perfect lawn. And there are no trout anymore. There are no mallards anymore. I wasn't that crazy about the muskrats, but they're no longer there. I didn't miss the eels that disappeared. My kids used to fish for all these things, and they catfish them and let them go. But when they yelled that they had an eel and I went down, I took it off, and it wrapped itself around. And over summer, didn't have any sugar or anything on it, and then they just wrapped and slimy over. And I'm a fisherman, but that was gross. But they never kept the fish. We always put them back in the brook. But now there's nothing alive anymore in those brooks. It's all gone. Used to have cattails. Everything just breaks my heart. But Joe Pye is still there. that hasn't minded. And it is very, the bees and the butterflies absolutely love it. They have changed the name of the plant. So Joe Pyeweed is no longer what it used to be called. Bugbane, I think.
No.
Eupatorium. Yeah, Eupatorium is the old name.
Yep.
It is now called Eutropium. Don't ask me why, but I love it. I have a pure white one in my backyard that stands about 12 feet tall. And then I have this one in my meadow, and I have that one in my back garden. But this is the one I really like. This is called Chocolate Joe Pyeweed. And it's much shorter. It only grows about 1 foot to 2 feet tall. It's sometimes looks chocolate, sometimes looks purple. You can't even begin to see all the butterflies that were on it. It doesn't bloom until the fall. It has this pretty white look to it. And there were butterflies, species of butterflies that I almost never see in my yard one year. But it's native to New England. It grows in wooded areas, but it will grow in, most of these like some moisture to them, your Joe Pyeweeds and everything in that family. But this shows some of the painted ladies that were on there. There were about 10 more that I couldn't get them all in one picture. And it's pretty because it has that sort of chocolate colored color, and then it turns sort of a purple color. And it only grows about maybe 2 feet tall, unlike some of the other Joe Pies that grow that tall. So that's a late October is when that blooms. Sedums, I'm sure a lot of you grow sedums. You can go crazy over sedums. This is good old autumn joy that almost everyone grew years and years and years ago, and still is out there covered with bees and butterflies and praying mantises once in a while. Now you can get purple ones that can be almost like a ground cover or a little bit taller. This is my favorite. I've had this for a couple of years now. I bought it as a pot, to grow in a pot. And it draped down the side of the pot and it rooted itself into one of my gardens. And
We got listed Autumn Joy, Brilliant, Bertram, Anderson, and Angela. Or
Angelina's the winner. I bought this in that container. It drooped down, it rooted in. I have it in many gardens now, patches this big, it only grows that tall. It starts in the spring with a beautiful lime green color to it. Then it turns shocking gold, and I mean shocking. Very textural. When it starts to grow where I don't want it, I grab a handful, throw it, roots itself down somewhere else. Likes it hot and dry, and I don't think I have the fall. Oh, I do. That's what it looks like in January.
It's beautiful.
So it doesn't, I mean, a lot of other sedums have no life to them in the winter. That was taken January 2nd. And it gets little crystals on it, so it's all pale yellow, then it turns to that shocking yellow, and then it turns like that in the middle of the winter with little crystals on it. And yeah,
Is that Autumn Joy? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's Angelina.
Oh, Angelina.
So it only grows about 2 to 3 inches tall, whereas Autumn Joy grows, maybe a foot tall. It depends. There's so many sedums. At the nursery I work at, we must carry about 15 or 20 different kinds of sedums, and they're all different. Some are low ground covers, others are taller, some are purple, some are raspberry, all different colors of flowers, but Angelina to be able to have a pair of gloves, yank a piece, throw it, and it just shows up somewhere else. It's really neat. And if you're trying to get rid of it, it's easy to get rid of. Toward the end now, the fall blooming asters. These are native. These were in my wetlands area when we moved in. I had it in multiple places. Bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, everybody loves it. This is a non-native version that grows about that tall. It doesn't start blooming until October, November. Blooms for weeks. This doesn't do it. It's a really true blue color for it. And I'm trying to think of that name of that one. My brain just went to bed last night and didn't wake up. Faster.
Purple
Or
dog.
Tartaricus. Tartaricus. So it's non-native, but it blooms so late and so tall, and
It just flew into my yard. I thought it was native. It just.
it's really tall in that lavender color.
It's much bluer than that. It's very, very blue.
Because there are, this one is sort of a plum. Oops. That is usually, that's more, I have those that are bluish but this one is
Like this
yeah,
tall.
it might be
And
astroturf.
it's bright, it's almost like a sky blue color. It's very
Oh, yeah,
blue.
this was, it's hard to capture this correctly on, and I've had it for probably, 15 years anyway. Last but not least, Montauk daisies, from Montauk on Long Island. And it's sort of like a Shasta daisy, but it blooms really late. Easy to grow, loves hot, dry, crummy, sandy soil. Really easy to grow. The best thing, the one thing a lot of people do though is they just, let it go through the winter and then just wait for it to come back. You want to hack it. You want to cut it way back early in the spring, and you'll have, otherwise, I remember meeting my mother-in-law for the first time, who was a non-gardener, and she had Montauk daisy, 2 or 3 of them next to her driveway. And they stood about this tall, and all they had was one ugly brown flower at the top. They looked pathetic. And that, if you never prune them, that's they grow taller every year, and you get one ugly brown flower at the top, and that's it. But
That's what I'm doing when I go home today.
and really, I highly recommend, I cut it down to about that tall.
Okay.
And then they look like this. And otherwise, they just get leggy.
Kind of like chrysanthemums.
So it's really, they're really handsome, and they bloom a lot later. They love, this is one in our area where a lot of people who live along the shore. It loves it hot, dry, sandy soil. So you can kill it with kindness. I mean, it really, it likes neglect and pruning. And last but not least, ornamental grasses, and that really varies from person to person. I've always found that, as far as I'm concerned, feather reed grass ugly. It does nothing for me. I like things that have a little more pizzazz, like penniseums. I like these penniseums that have little, almost like a little bottle brush to them.
And they're so soft.
They're just, and they come quite a few. You can kind of get a raspberry color now one, as well as other ones. We have the panicums. This is panicum, okay, which has a very attractive bluish tint to us. This one I've grown probably for at least 30 years. Northern sea oats. My family had a home on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and sea oats were all over the hillsides near the water on the Outer Banks, and this always brought back memories. The problem is, if you do not cut off the seed heads, you end up with it. So I deliberately, every fall, I cut it down and I spray them shiny silver or shiny gold, and use them in containers all throughout the house during the holidays. I have some that are 15 years old, they've never dropped a single seed. So, and when they're painted silver and gold, they're just beautiful for holiday decorations. But easy to grow, both grow in sun or shade, but after a while you'll end up with lots of babies if you don't pull them up. And then you have little blue stem. This became Perennial Plant of the Year about 2 years ago. Very pretty blue. It's hard to describe. This one was taken on a giant sand dune on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, growing in pure sand. It is native to our area, so you can grow it in a regular garden, and it's a really delicate but very pretty blue, and that's what it looks like in the fall. It turns that shocking color. That doesn't do it justice. It turns an incredible, shocking blue. Have any of you heard of Bedrock Gardens?
No.
It's in New Hampshire, in Lee, New Hampshire. It is one of the most unique public gardens you could possibly ever think of visiting. And they have this in the pink color. Take this room and make it 10 times larger, and it's all different kinds of ornamental grasses, and this is pure blue, pink. And it is plants that you have never seen growing anywhere else. They have a great sense of humor. The woman that's the owner of it likes to create unusual, I don't even know what to call them, prehistoric birds made of metal hanging from trees. And just unbelievable, taking metal and old tractors and things like that and turning it into, sculptures. And they're unbelievable. The director now is John Forty, and he was head of Plymouth Plantation down my way. Then he went to Strawberry Bank. Then he went to Massport, and now he is at Bedrock. And I think there might have been one other place too. But Mayor has written incredible books, but he's now at Bedrock. And you will see plants there. Oh, they have a beautiful water garden called the Wiggle Waggle Garden that has koi in it, and it goes, from all the way back there to all the way out front here. It's just the sculptures, the She goes to Europe and brings back plants you've just never seen before, and they're funny, and they have a great sense of humor, and sculptures are absolutely ridiculous. So I've been there a couple times. I've decided, I think I'm going to join it this year. It's a 2-hour drive for me, but it's probably not bad for you.
Yeah.
I don't know, do you know where Lee, New Hampshire is?
But my phone does.
Yeah, tell us.
I'm
wondering, might as well tell us.
I haven't looked up how far it is from other, when I'm talking to other clubs, but Bedrock is just, I wouldn't think, I mean, I think it's westward of here. It takes me about 2 hours from the South Shore, but it took me over an hour to get here, so it's going to put you closer. It's in Lee, New Hampshire. L-E-E.
My phone is just slow. There we go. Thank you. Get the directions, please. From here, that would be nice. 40 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I'm jealous. It takes me over 2 hours.
40 minutes, so it's up 95, then over 101, then up 125. So it's
That's
west of Exeter and Portland and south of Dover.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. I'm not sure whether they're open yet, but they have a wonderful website. Bedrock.
Nice.
It's just the most, and I've known John for many, going back to when he was at Plymouth Plantation, so I've known him probably for 30 or 40 years. And it's bouncing from one, I'm on the board at Road Trip, Mass Board.
Yeah, you want to go?
I'm enjoying this year. I have a very good friend who's the president of the Hospice Society that lives in Nashua, New
Bedrock
Hampshire,
Gardens,
and
37
drives
minutes.
all the way to Bedrock every, I don't know whether it's every week or, and help with the guides. She has, I think this is dumb, but if you don't mind staying another second. Let me get out of this. I have a lecture on Great Public Gardens of New England.
Bedrock is temporarily closed. It's not open yet.
I think they usually open in May. I could be wrong.
My daughter gave me a membership to Garden in the Woods this year.
It's wonderful.
I'm so excited to Framingham. I'm
Yes,
so excited to be
I
going
go
out
there.
there.
I go there every year.
I've never been.
See, I was doing a lecture the other day that I showed all the stuff from that for native plants.
Yeah.
It used to be
That's-
called,
During the pandemic. there was
Garden in the Woods. Garden in the Woods is the name of the place you go. But it used to be called,
Framingham. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what it's now called Native Plant Trust.
Yeah.
It used to be, I can't remember, it had another common name for being native plants, but now it's Native Plant Trust.
I'm excited to go.
I gave a lecture to the Wareham Garden, not Wareham, garden club that's right down the street from them, but they met in Weston instead of their usual place. But I've been a member of that for quite a few years.
I'm really trying this year to make a commitment to getting rid of as much grass as humanly possible in my yard.
I do it to a point, but I have an acre and a half, so it's kind of hard to cut it down too much, but
I don't have that much.
She needs to do a new house here and have to go on some trying to pick away at the grass. But a little
A
bit.
little path, or a little play place, but food and wild place, that's what I want.
I don't know, I'm going. I don't know, fertilized.
I don't know any of that.
I'm not, that's about it.
And I'm sure that it's in here, but I can't.
Yeah,
My brain's gone.
that's okay.
But
This is lovely.
does anyone have any other questions? I mean, that's only a little bit of what I grow in my garden.
This is a beautiful garden. Can I come live there? I don't eat much. I'm a vegetarian.
If there's any way, if you ever happen to be, I mean, I live only less than a mile off Route 3.
I'm going to Falmouth on Monday.
I mean, at this time of the year, it doesn't have a lot to show, to be honest, but I mean, I'm just starting to get stuff cleaned up, and
My son lives in Falmouth, so I made the trip fairly.
if you go down later in the summer, I mean, it's usually open to the public in July because of my collection of dailies. So we did the National Pasta Convention in 2001. I had 500 people from all over the country. And now, next summer, not this summer, but next summer, we are hosting the National Pasta Convention. I don't know yet how many people are involved in that, but
I have a neighbor who is daylily crazy, right over on Elm Street. She's, I
does she
don't
belong to the
know,
House Daily Society?
I don't know if she knows about it at all. She's
There's a very active Daily Society. I must admit, I haven't been, they now meet at Tower Hill Botanic Garden. And, but a lot of the stuff is done Zoom now.
But she's, I don't know, she's probably got maybe 80 different kinds of lilies. Just,
Yeah, I got up to
So
about
many.
500 at one point.
yeah, so many.
But, you know, after a while, I hybridize too. I have a whole bunch of raised beds in my front yard that have probably 300 or 400 kids, but I never got around to it. You know, unfortunately, the deer and the bunnies and the voles have done some serious trouble on
Yeah.
some of my gardens. And I have a non-gardening husband, and unfortunately, I'm an amputee.
Oh.
Fell off a roof a number of years ago.
Oh,
So it's made it a little harder to do some of the stuff. I have a self-propelled push mower. And, you know, I'm getting old.
you don't get younger, that's not how it works.
No, not really, but, you know, I don't let much slow me down. I can't play, I met my husband playing competitive racket sports. And I can't do that anymore. I can't run and, so he built tennis courts for a very long time. He's just recently sold his business, so he's into pickleball. Pickleball, and more pickleball. And I can't do that. I can't change that kind of position and play racket sports, so, you know, I grew up playing competitive golf, but that's too much work too, so.
Well, your gardens are gorgeous.
That doesn't really show you my gardens. I mean,
Well, you can't unless you're in them.
but I really love people. People drop by when I'm not home and send me messages on their email. It's again, it's less than a mile off the highway. We can just get on, get off, and I do have clubs that make arrangements to come as groups. So I think actually Falmouth Garden Club is coming. A whole bunch of them in July to the garden. You said you were going to Falmouth?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't talked to that group in a long time, but I used to talk to them almost every other year. So they have a whole group coming to have lunch and tour the garden.
Oh, nice.
So if you're ever down Falmouth Way in the summer, I mean, I always have something blooming. but
I
just-
will, I'll stop by. I will.
And people drop by when no one's home, and then they just send me a picture or,
Leave your loaf of sourdough bread.
food is really low on my pocket. I just don't eat sourdough.
My daughter gave me a mother, she came up from Virginia, and you have to bring the mother with you or it dies, you see, so it travels like a cat everywhere you go. And so she brought it up, and I now have
sauerkraut every week.
I must admit, I do love sauerkraut.
It's wonderful.
So just to let everybody know, I don't know if you, aware that, so the Friends of the Newbury Town Library, we're the ones that are, and the treasurer, so we're the ones that really support a lot of these programs. This doesn't come without people on our taxes at work. No, this doesn't come from your taxes. So if you're not a member of the Friends, you can become a member of the Friends for as little as $10 or whatever. But any little bit that you donate, I've got the donation jar there. So if you enjoy the programs, a few dollars here can really help to keep it going. Yes, and it's,
What's your name?
I'm Pam, Myers Penny. So nice to meet you.
Suzanne, thank you, this was very
So,
informative.
and-
Is it okay if I email you with questions as the season begins?
I apologize for just, my
Yeah.
brain is really,
It happens as we get older.
I'm getting old.
Yeah.
I'm in my mid-70s.
But, and then we've got the plant sale coming up on the 20th, on May 20th. So if you have any plants that you want to separate, or plants that you're looking for, but if you have plants that you're trying to move around and separate or what have you, consider putting some of them in a pot and donating them. We'll be collecting during the week before, and of course the day before we'll be setting up. So anything you can do to contribute, or no problem with that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna try for a seat.